So as I was telling you, price of related good, substitute goods, and price of substitute good and demand for the other substitute good. So let's take one example. Let's take Coke and Pepsi. Okay. Now we are going to see what will be the impact of the change in the price of Coke on the demand for Pepsi. So we're going to find a cross effect. Okay. So for that we need to have price of Coke. What impact will this price of Coke have on demand for Coke, and thereafter what will be the impact on demand for Pepsi? Okay, just suppose that let the price of Coke increase. So when the price of Coke increases, naturally the demand for Coke falls. So but that satisfaction has to be fulfilled. So because you have decreased the demand for Coke, there will be an increase in the demand for Pepsi. Okay, similarly, if price of Coke falls, people who were earlier buying Pepsi will now start to buy Coke. So the demand for Coke will increase, and therefore the demand for Pepsi will fall. Okay, now if you remove this and see what is the impact, both are increasing or both are decreasing. So what kind of relation do they share? They have a positive relation. They have a positive relation. Okay, I hope you've understood this. They have a positive relationship. Okay, right. So next relationship between two commodities would be that they can be complementary goods. Okay, now these goods are used together. Okay, they are used together to satisfy a given want, and both of these goods will complete the deficiencies. I repeat, complete, not compete. Complete the deficiencies of each other. So they will be demanded together. Example, car and petrol, pen and ink, shoe and socks. Okay, or coffee and sugar. So when these are used together, they are called complementary goods. So in similar manner as substitute good, we are going to see what will be the impact of change in the price of a complementary good on the demand for the other complementary good. Okay, so let's take car and petrol. Okay, so what are we going to see? What will be the impact of change in the price of car on the demand for petrol? What will be the impact of change in the price of car on the demand for petrol? Okay, now if price of car increases, what will happen to the demand for car? It will fall. When you don't want car, when you don't have a car, why do you need a petrol? So the demand for petrol also falls. If the price of car falls, people will start buying car. If there is more of car, then obviously you will need more of petrol. So therefore this kind of a pattern happens. So let's just delete this center thing and find out what is happening. Price of car increasing, demand for petrol falling. Price of car falling, demand for petrol increasing. So what kind of relation do they share? Negative relation. Okay, so substitute goods have positive relation between the price of the substitute and demand for the other substitute, and complementary goods may you will have a negative relation between price of a complementary good and demand for the other complementary good. I hope this is clear. Okay, so I'm rubbing this part. The third is income of the consumer. Income of the consumer. Okay, generally income is the ability to buy a particular commodity. So income of the consumer normally has a positive impact on the demand. Okay, so just imagine, but then that also depends what kind of a commodity are you buying. Okay, now there are two kinds of commodities: normal goods. Okay, now normal goods are those goods which are in your day to day, like some of the before we do normal goods, we should understand what inferior goods are. Now so there are two goods, normal good and inferior goods. Okay, now these inferior goods are used because there is no other alternative available because of your low income. So let's just suppose that you are very poor, and since you're poor you are using a substandard quality of rice. So now when you are using the substandard quality of rice, as soon as your income increases you will stop buying the substandard quality of rice and start buying a better quality of rice. So what will happen if the income increases? When the Y is the symbol for income. When income increases, the demand for these inferior goods will fall, because now because of the increase in the income you start using a better quality commodity. Okay, better commodity, so therefore the demand for inferior goods fall with increase in the income. Okay, and if there is a fall in the income, obviously people will start again buying the substandard quality, so the increase in the demand for inferior goods. So inferior goods में इनकम का नेगेटिव रिलेशनशिप है, इनकम का. ओके, बट नॉर्मल गुड्स क्या होगा? नॉर्मल गुड्स में इनकम और डिमांड में क्या रिलेशनशिप है? एज इनकम इंक्रीजेज डिमांड विल इंक्रीज, एज इनकम फॉल्स डिमांड विल फॉल. ओके, so this kind of a definition of a normal good and an inferior good is always relative. So like for example, if you are talking about a better quality rice and a substandard quality of rice, better quality of rice will be normal good and substandard quality of rice will be inferior good. So whenever that you give an example, you will be saying inferior good. If they ask you about the example of inferior good, you will say substandard quality of rice in relation to better quality of rice. And if you talk about normal good, you will say better quality rice in relation to substandard quality of rice. So it's always a relative definition. So again we're going to do income of the consumer has an impact depending upon what commodity we are talking about. If we are talking about normal good, an increase in income will lead to increase in demand for the normal good, and a fall in income will lead to fall in demand for normal good. But in case of inferior good, an increase in demand would lead to fall in demand for inferior good, and a fall in income will lead to increase in demand for inferior good. So did you understand these two things? Normal good and inferior good. Okay, right. So I'm rubbing this also. The fourth factor which affects the demand for a consumer is tastes and preferences of the consumer. It has a very important bearing. Like for example, there is a specific pattern of consumption of a consumer. So no matter what is the change in whatever is happening, change in the other factors, your taste does not move out. So like for example, if you have a taste for coffee, the demand for coffee will be high, okay, for the consumer. Like if you like wearing long kurtas, you will always wear long kurta, so the demand for long kurta by you would be more, okay. So if the consumer has a favorable taste and preference for a commodity, the demand for that commodity will be high. And if that particular person does not have a taste, like if you don't like Karela, you will never buy it, okay. So the generally if there is taste for the commodity, taste and preference for the commodity, you will have a higher demand for that commodity. I'll just add one more thing here, fashion. So if a particular commodity is in fashion, then the demand for that commodity will be high in that period of time. So taste and preference of the consumer. So what are the 4 factors? Let's just tabulate it together. Price of the commodity, price of the commodity, negative relationship. Price of related good, that depends upon what kind of relation do the two commodities share. If they are substitute goods, then positive relation. If they are complementary goods, then negative relation. Income of the consumer, that also depends upon the nature of the commodity. If you are talking about normal good, income and demand will have a positive impact. If you are talking about inferior good, then income and demand will have negative relationship. Taste and preference of the consumer, if there is a favorable taste and preference, there will be more of the demand for the commodity, okay. Right. So we're going to do another topic and that is demand function. Mathematically, demand is a function of all the factors which affect the demand. Like you can have a mathematical equation for the demand depending upon what factor you are talking about. So demand function means like whatever demand you have depends upon the factors and the bearing of that factor on the demand for that particular commodity. So I'll just tell you this with the help of an example, but first of all, it's a little of mathematics here. So what is demand function? It explains the functional relationship between quantity demanded of a commodity and the determinants of demand. So what is demand function? It is the functional relationship between quantity demanded for a commodity and determinants of demand. So how can you write this? Demand for a commodity X is a function of, what were the factors which we talked about? Price of the commodity, so Px. And what was the other thing? Price of related goods, so PR. Then income of the consumer, Y. Then taste and preference of the consumer, okay. Where what is dx? Dx is the quantity demanded of commodity X. F simply means function of Px, is equal to price of X, of commodity X. Y is equal to income of the consumer. T is equal to taste and preference of the consumer. Okay, I'll just give you a simple example. Like if dx is equal to 100 minus 4p. Okay, so if you are expected to calculate demand, this is the function which is given. Okay, so this is the function in terms of price. So if demand is to be calculated at price 6, so how will you calculate? Dx is equal to 100 minus 4 into 6. So in place of p, you will write down the price of p. So 100 minus 24, that is 76 will be the demand. Okay, so that was just an example. You can write any of the functions, like there can be any relationships which can be given and you are supposed to calculate that. Okay, right? Okay. We had discussed about the law of demand. What is the law of demand? According to the law of demand, other things being constant, there is a negative relationship between price of the commodity and its demand. Okay, now you may ask me, what are these other things? Okay, now the other things are other factors which affect demand, which means price के अलावा बाकी सारे factors should be kept constant. What are the other factors? Price of related goods, income of the consumer, taste and preference should be constant. So other things being constant, there is a negative relationship between price of the commodity and its demand. Okay, law of demand is this. Okay, so I'm just writing down the assumptions and we'll end this for today. And the rest of the time, जितना अभी किया है, I'll be sending you notes. Please write down the notes till this point of time. Assumptions of law of demand. Assumptions of law of demand. Okay, and that is other things being constant. That is what the assumption is. So what are the other things? First, price of substitute goods should not change. Then second, price of complementary good should not change. income of the consumer should not change. Taste and preference of the consumer should not change. Okay, so today we're going to do this much, and you're going to write down whatever we have done till now